Welcome to Cafe DC. I'm Faiz Rahman, and today we are going to talk about a very different topic, and we have a unique guest, very prominent, and we are actually lucky to have him here in the studios. He doesn't come here very often to this area. Dr. Tariq Habib Cheema. Dr. Cheema is unique in this sense that he left America for Pakistan for the last, I think, last 2 years. For the last 2 years he's been in Pakistan. He's been doing such a great work. But before he left for Pakistan, he founded an organization, an international organization called the World Congress of Muslim Philanthropists. To me, it was a very unique concept. Yes, Muslims are famous and they're known to make zakah and other forms of charity, but to do it in a very organized way and to make sure that we are all connected, that's where Dr. Cheema is focusing his efforts on. Welcome to Cafe DC, and I appreciate your time. We wanted to do it for a long time, but you're a busy man. You're an international traveler, so luckily you are here, and we just got. So please tell us about your organization first.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me here. The World Congress of Muslim Philanthropists was formally launched in 2008 in the presence of a number of heads of states and leading corporation executives and foundations, primarily from the Muslim world. But we are proud that this was a very indigenous effort. The Congress was born in Chicago, like in the United States, and very soon it proved to be the only and the premier network of the Muslim donors worldwide. So I think that in one way was a value creation that we have done as the American Muslims to the rest of the world, for very reason that US has one of the most sophisticated philanthropic system, and being one of the most generous as well as organized institution of giving exist in this country.
Can you elaborate a little bit how, when you say the US has one of the most, at least, organized systems of giving and charity, how?
Well, if you look at the amount of the endowment in this country, if you look into the number of foundations, be it corporate or family, and the grant making is done through a structured process, there is a mechanism of vigilance and accountability, and the laws that govern the giving practice are very strong. So I believe that this is something that the Muslim world at large was missing, and which in fact have caused the negative imagery for the Muslims around the world. And although that it was probably a fringe element who would have involved in extremist activities, the whole giving of the Muslims was getting the negative imagery. Muslims are almost 1/4 of the world population. Their giving is in a huge number. And I believe that the Muslim giving is as good as any other giving. And like any other giving coming from the other ethnic or religious groups, we do also have the elements that hold extreme views. So what is the best way to counter is to make your donors aware. Let the people know that the due diligence matters. They have to invest in the communities. They should remain a part of their giving process. They shouldn't just give and ask no questions and forget and never make the recipients accountable. And then they also have to invest in the initiatives that in fact help you to come out of, and I'm giving you example of poverty, so rather giving poor a fish, you have to teach them how to fish. So the whole concept of the World Congress was how to make this huge, spontaneous, generous Muslim giving, turn it into an effective, accountable, and strategic giving. So this was the purpose, and we are very pleased that over 8 years, we have seen now number of the spin-offs, number of the initiatives, collaborations across ethnicity, across faith, but they all have a common purpose.
One of the challenges that we see, of course, And you rightly said that, yes, of course, learning from an established institution here in this country, and then taking these concepts overseas and basically sharing with the people who may not have a very clear-cut idea about how this system works here in terms of establishment of proper laws and accountability. So how was it perceived and received in other Muslim countries when you took these concepts to these huge donors? I mean, they had lots of money to donate, to give, but they didn't have any idea how to do it properly.
You know, let me be honest. I think in the beginning it was a very tough situation. I mean, you're based in the United States, and it's an environment which was quite polarized, and you talk about, you know, defending and improving the Muslim giving. And in the other part of the world, you are seen as an alien coming from the north and, you know, trying to talk about the giving. But I think just through the determination and a sustained dialogue with the sovereign governments, with the donors, we eventually made our case. And I think the difficulty comes when you export the ideas what to do. We are not into that. We say how to do it. Let the countries decide what their problems are. Let the donors and communities and nations decide what are their priorities. But when they are giving money for the good cause, there has to be an established mechanism where your giving is transparent, your giving is, is effective. So I think the initial confusion was that are we exporting any agendas that goes with the giving? So once we have clarified that and the air was clear, then I think we were very welcomed in many countries. And now I'll give you an example. We encourage to do a multi-donor initiatives. So we have established a fund called Hasana Fund, which is a multi-donor hunger fund. And half of the, or I would say that most of the money that has been put into this fund is coming from the Muslims. But when it goes towards implementation, which is addressing the hunger problem, we do not just limit ourselves to the Muslim countries. So we will go where the hunger is at its worst. And the 5-country pilot program we are planning to roll out, only one of those 5 countries is a Muslim country. So I think this is the paradigm shift where we believe that Muslims, with a huge number, almost 6 billion people around the world, also have wealth. Yes, they have poverty, and while they address locally and regionally, they should also be a part and parcel of the international donors community.
And that's where these theological issues also come into the picture. There's a very famous saying of the Prophet, or at least this is something that we understand, that when you give from this hand, the other hand doesn't know. So it comes with giving in the Muslim societies. It comes with lots of modesty and humbleness, so to speak. The Western concept of giving and charity is quite different. And then again, there is another, at least, understanding, or it may be a misunderstanding, that the Muslim giving can only be spent on Muslims, or at least there are certain kinds of givings that have to be spent only on Muslims. So how do you deal with, and I know you have a very good background in medicine, in social work. I don't know, you're also a religious scholar, but how do you deal with these theological issues? Because giving and theology is quite linked.
Actually, of course, I'm not an expert in theology, but World Congress has been lucky to invite a number of scholars around the world, and we have these discussions. In fact, the whole notion of giving in Islam is very supporting, is very encouraging to give, and not only
it's one of the pillars
Muslim,
of the faith.
Well, if we are talking about the obligatory giving, zakat, which is a purely a religious act, and it's an obligation. Actually, the money to begin with does not belong to you, but belong to the people who are in need. And even in the categories of the qualifications, one is also for the non-Muslims. So it is not that it has to be with the Muslims only. But then there is a lot of other giving that Muslims do, faith inspired or just as a generous human being out of their compassion, right, for the needies. So the issue of whether you have to talk about your giving or you have to do it in quietness, we have had these discussions many times, and the thing that we learned was the whole concept of privacy is for the recipients so that their self-esteem is not hurt. But when it comes to donors, there is no harm in telling with the intention of encouraging your other folks and the friends. So it's not like that you have to do it in quietness, and that has caused actually a problem, and people would keep no record of giving, and the money would move into the hands that may not utilize it right. So I think it's not about that you should not talk about what you give, you should not acknowledge, you should not record what you're doing. It's about make sure that you preserve the dignity of the recipients, and that is where the privacy lies. That is where the quietness is encouraged. But if I'm giving, it's good that I talk about it. It's good that it is recorded, even for monitoring purposes, for encouraging and inspiring other people who perhaps, look at me. So I think there is no really a dilemma that comes, that actually brings giving, and confront it with the theology.
We have to take a short break, Tariq. I thought before asking another question, we'll take a short break and then we'll come back and also talk about your transition after having spent so much time here in this country. Now you're living in Pakistan with your family. So how's that experience like? So please stay with us. We'll be back.
I find giving is such a powerful thing to connect people across faith, ethnicities, and colors, because they all then become human. And that's why I think the Muslim giving has to stand up and face the challenge, improve its quality, and then make a difference in the world for everybody.
Welcome back. Our guest today is Dr. Tariq Cheema, the founder and the CEO of the World Congress of Muslim Philanthropists, and we're having a very interesting discussion. Tariq, before we left for the break, we briefly talked about your transition from, I don't know if it's a long-term transition or it's just short-term, to basically serve the goals of your organization. So how's it like that now you're spending most of your time in Pakistan?
Yeah. Well, I left Pakistan when I was 17 years old, and I think at the age 47, having the thoughts of going back wasn't something, quick. I was rather late, and but I was lucky to go back and enjoy the company and blessings of my parents, and then taking my wife and 3 kids, all of them were born and raised here, back to the to our motherland, and expose them to not only to the culture but the disparities that involves our society. I think it's very important for the young growing kids to be content, especially in the time when everything is becoming so fast, so high tech, and unfortunately so materialistic. And that worked very well, because to me it was sort of what I have coined a term, I called it social vaccination. You have to expose your children when they are young towards some of these issues, rather isolating them completely. Let them see what is going on. They can perhaps think how to help them. They also can be content of what they have in life and not worrying about what they haven't got in their lives. So this was the purpose. But to my surprise and to my luck, as I landed in Pakistan, I was able to spot many more opportunities to make a difference in a humble way, but not in a way that I would say it is not significant. So as I moved to Pakistan, I joined American Refugee Committee, which is an American international NGO working in Pakistan since 2001. So I became the country representative for ARC. So as I moved to Pakistan, I sort of redesigned the strategy of ARC as far as Pakistan is concerned. We brought education on the forefront, while we have been long working into health and to shelter and other things that has to designed around the refugees and IDPs. But now we are working on mainstream. We have the girls' education as one of the very primary thing. But the way we are doing it in consultation with the communities. We do not want to take an imported formula which may not be very different, but we believe that there has to be a process in which local people are involved.
You have to localize all the
Exactly.
ideas.
You have to invite the local partnership. If they are patronizing your program, then it becomes their program. Then they actually become very motivated people who will take your program forward. So we had tried this, starting a non-formal education in program in the pockets where there is no school, and reaching out to the communities to go around and find the girls and boys who are not going to school, then host the school in their communities. We fund the school, we fund the teacher, we provide books, but we leave the everything in terms of administration to the communities. So I think the one key word was trust. So if you build the trust with the communities, and when they understand that you are actually there to help, not to sort of degenerate, again, this is, perception, degenerate their generations, their next generations, or go against their culture or faith, we are not. So in the whole exercise of what should be we teaching, how we should do, reaching out to the kids and bring them to the school, we involve education committees. And that is working very fine. Besides that, we also are doing something which I believe is a trend setting, that we are running a program with the help of the United States government for the women empowerment. And guess who are our partners? Are the faith leaders. And this is happening in Balochistan. So at the launch of the program, in fact, we had the 26 leading religious figures from Balochistan sitting with me and rolling out this program. So I think that is an important lesson for all of us to learn, because you cannot go into communities merely with the support of international donors and work in isolation. You go there, you talk to them and say, well, listen, this money is going to be spent somehow. Do you want to be spent without you being involved in it? And then you have a problem with the way this money has been spent, or you should actually take the ownership of that. And I think this paradigm shift has worked so well for ARC that now these models are being keenly looked and watched by others. So this
very
is,
good.
I think,
that is two questions.
Yeah.
First, I would like to know the feedback from your children. How it's like for them being in Pakistan, American kids now basically going to schools in Pakistan. So what's their reaction? What's their feedback?
Well, they believe it's a compromise when it comes to their, lifestyle. And but at the same time, I'm seeing that they are getting also passionate about the people that they're around. They want to do something. My 12 years old youngest boy wants to start a hen bank. So he can have the hens and he gives to the families, and when they produce more hens, he can take half from them back and then give it to another family.
Like father, like son. Huh?
So, well, I think it's really important, because I'm worried. I'm worried that if we will not expose our children to this whole, the giving and the ability to see and connect with the people who, with the have-nots, that means we may have a life where we have everything in terms of material, but living a very unhappy life. So I think that's very important. It's probably the best investment I made.
Very good point. One more question, going back to your organization, the Congress. We see lots of charities operating in Pakistan. They come here, they raise funds, they have huge galas, some of them actually very upscale, glamorous galas, so to speak. Do you also work with those kinds of organizations, or just trying to understand this, or your organization raises funds itself through these programs, or your connection is directly with the donors?
See, by design, World Congress stays away from the direct humanitarian assistance delivery. It also does not compete with the various humanitarian organizations that, as you have mentioned, that go around and raise funds and try to help a community or a cause, which often is seen that overwhelming majority, maybe 99% of the Muslim giving goes towards firefighting. It's a flood, it's a war, it's a conflict, and
refugee problem.
Right.
Yes.
So we believe that it is very noble and very important to help those people who are in crisis. But at the same time, you cannot ignore the fact that investing in the future of your generations is extremely important, which means education, which means science, technology, innovation, research, which means social development.
Yeah. So basically your organization works with these mega donors,
right,
so to speak, and then tries to find different projects where you can invest.
Right.
As
and we invite sometime more donors if they have a common cause to join hands and do this work, or do at their own. So we have actually donor education, issue awareness, designing the effective programs, and then raising money to implement that program. So this is a holistic approach, but our constituents are the donors, the people who give money. And we believe at some time it is important for the communities, and diaspora communities in particular, to know who they give. But they also have to engage. It's not about writing a check and feel good. It's about writing a check, but that means starting a partnership with those organizations, because you have to know how they are identifying their beneficiaries. What is the cost of the delivery? How well they are doing this job, how well they report it. Are they sharing with them their annual reports or not, or any other audited reports? So I think it is extremely important for any donor, even at the grassroots level, to be a smart donor.
Tariq, one more question that basically, so after actually 9/11, the attacks of 9/11, the charity within the Muslim community became very problematic, because there were organizations which had a different front, and the people here, they didn't know that the money that they're donating, where actually that's going to go, or where that money is ending up. And sometimes those innocent donors here in the community also got into trouble with the law enforcement. So on that part, I'm sure you have some mega donors, some bigger donors here in this country who work with your group. How does that work out now that after so many years of the attacks? Do you feel that the community is now educated enough to make sure that whatever they do in giving, they do it properly? What's the level of understanding and knowledge you feel there is right now?
I think they're not yet, I would call it, at the level where we can call them smart donors. There is a fear and there's a hesitation in giving, which I think is very unfortunate, because we are undermining the potential of our donors to give money to the causes that are important to everybody. But saying that people has to be smart in this giving is not enough. I think the onus of responsibility falls on the organization like ours and many others who work with the donors. And that is, you create a vehicle, a mechanism that allows people to make a better decisions. And for this, we are working on a model that calls secure giving, which in fact will be widely publicized to the donors, that they should look that the recipient organization has been accredited by the secure giving or not. And this will be particularly focusing on the OIC member countries, because I believe as the Muslim giving, particularly the Muslim charities and NGOs, in fact, are doing an incredible job. But let's not forget that they are not always organized, they are sloppy. So I'm more worried about that sloppiness, not necessarily whether they are doing something wrong or fishy. I think that sloppiness can eventually lead them into trouble as well as to the donors into trouble. So what they need to do is to be more transparent, they're more accessible.
Proper record keeping.
Right. And then we, through secure giving, donors, whether they're a community-based or they're a big organization, they can look into it. Just like when you do business, they check your credit history, or you go for some other, DNB numbers and things like that. So we are working on that model, and I think this will be rolled out in 2016.
Compliant giving,
exactly.
basically.
So it's basically, you will not rate them as a 1-star or 2-star or 3-star. It's not about charity rating. It's about how well they are governed, how transparent the system is, whether they provide safety and security to the, and the liability release to their donors. And so this model will actually provide, we believe, an enormous leverage to the donor to make the right giving.
Very good. Dr. Tariq Habib Cheema, it's great to have you here in our studios today. Very unique and useful discussion. I hope people in not in the community, but also around the world, they understand what it's like to give as Muslim in a very changed world, and what it means to have secure and compliant giving. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And the last note is that I find giving is such a powerful thing to connect people across faith, ethnicities, and colors, because they all then become human. And that's why I think the Muslim giving has to stand up and face the challenge, improve its quality, and then make a difference in the world for everybody.
Well, on this great thought, we end this episode of Cafe DC. Thank you for watching. See you next week.